And you're listening to On the Record with Tiffany. And today I have my special guest, Bexar County District Attorney Joe Gonzales. How are you today, Joe?
Hello, I'm doing great, Tiffany. Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm happy to have you here, even under these circumstances, with us having lost John Lewis. He was such an icon in the civil rights movement, but he was someone who touched all of our lives in the most significant way, because I wouldn't be sitting here were it not for John Lewis. If he wouldn't have led the charge along with Martin Luther King Jr. in civil rights and in getting Black people, brown people, women the right to jobs and equality in this nation.
Absolutely. I grew up in the late 60s and went to college in the 70s, and I certainly remember the civil rights movement, and it had quite an impact on me when I went to college.
Yeah, right before. So you went to college right as all of that was going on. So what was it like for you, hearing and seeing that news footage and the movement as it was occurring around you? What was that like on your campus?
Well, again, I was in grade school in the late 60s. I started college in the mid 70s. But by then, it certainly was in the stream of culture, and everyone was aware of the importance of the civil rights movement. We all were aware that it was something that was important for us to be aware of. And I was a political science major, so it was very poignant with me because we certainly had many discussions. I went to college here in San Antonio at St. Mary's, and there were a lot of progressive thinkers back then. A lot of my professors and mentors were very sensitive to the civil rights movement.
So progressive thinkers in a red state. Yeah. What was that like at St. Mary's? I mean, in the 70s, St. Mary's in the 70s.
Well, we weren't always a red state. I mean, I think a lot of we were a blue state for a very long time. We then turned purple and then ultimately red, as you say. Mm-hmm. But I think people have always been aware of the civil rights movement. People have always been aware of the contributions of people like Martin Luther King and certainly John Lewis and other leaders, Andrew Young, other leaders in the Black community, just like we've had leaders in the Hispanic community, Cesar Chavez and individuals like that.
Mm-hmm. The Hispanic community is a wonderful one, and in combination with the Black community here, because San Antonio did so much in terms of civil rights and just kind of working together. One of the leaders in civil rights in San Antonio was Henry Cisneros. Like, he was one of the first people in that Martin Luther King Jr. march. We have the largest one in the country, and Henry is part of the reason why. That's one of the things I love about San Antonio, is that we work together. It's a city where the reason why we're a minority city is because we know how to work together. It's not about one side or the other. I mean, I definitely see some heated debates. We will have a heated debate, but here in San Antonio, unlike a lot of other parts of the country, we have maintained the ability to agree to disagree and to come to a good road for all of our people, something that's going to work for everybody, as opposed to just digging in. We tend to try to work together, and you can see that in our history over time. When I think about people like John Lewis, and just seeing this weekend when he was carried across the bridge the very bridge that he was beaten on. I just thought, wow, like look. I mean, we have a long way to go. There's no doubt about that, but we've come a long way too.
Absolutely. And I think it is important that we remind the younger generations of our history and how far we've come from those years in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
And you know, are we there yet? Of course not. We see that every day when we turn on the television. Even today we see systemic racism in different facets of our life, and just about any industry, in business and education, certainly in law enforcement and the courts. But as you say, we need to work together. We need to be able to come to the table. And as you say, we can always agree to disagree, but it's so important to be able to engage in a dialogue and do it peacefully, because I think that's progress, right? Instead of threatening each other, let's come to the table and let's talk about each other's perspective and each other's viewpoint and see if we can find some middle ground. So you're absolutely right about that.
And that was John Lewis's entire. That was how he spent his entire career. Is he studied Gandhi, and that's where the peaceful protests came from. Is their study of Gandhi, and that meant that they decided, okay, if I'm hit, what am I going to do? What is my reaction going to be? If if hoses are turned on us, what is the reaction going to be? We must still stand. And even if we fall, you don't hit back, because the point in this is not violence, because we know violence begets violence. The point in it is to change the hearts of men. This was a moral and spiritual journey, not a political one. It had nothing to do with red or blue. It had everything to do with moral compass, with who we are as a people, and wanting your fellow man to see you, the inside of you, who you are inside, because that's what changes humans. Not laws, not we can put laws in place, and we certainly will, but it is in those poignant moments like that human beings are changed. And one of the greatest ones, I think, with John Lewis was when he was beaten. It was, I believe it was like March 5th. Wasn't it like March 5th or March 7th? 1965, he was beaten by a white trooper. And years later, that trooper came back and asked for his forgiveness. And John Lewis gave him forgiveness and a friendship thereafter. And that is what really the microcosm of all of this was. It was that the hardest of hearts can be softened by something as important as a moral stance and maintaining your moral stance. That's what they were doing. And I sometimes when I'm listening to what's happening, I think we need to remember that perspective. That's the historical fact, and the importance in us as humans that has to be realized in any movement where there's a change that's to occur. It has to be a moral and a spiritual change. Like, it's the spirit of this very nation that we love so much. He epitomized that, and I'm very thankful that he lived and that he pushed that idea forward, because it's one that even today resonates with us.
That's true. And some of the most difficult scenes to watch is when you see videos of Mr. Lewis being beaten and him not fighting back. It's difficult to see. That's right. Because it is our human nature is to react, and if somebody punches, you punch back. It's more difficult to restrain yourself.
That's
it's
right.
More difficult to sit on your hand, or even better, extend your hand, extend the olive branch. So
and
that was
that's
very
what
moving.
that was all about. And it was that was the very thing that moved her soul as a human being. Looking at that, because you realize how committed those freedom riders were, and you realized how important it was for us to recognize the humanity in our fellow man, and the simple desire to have the same things that the majority had at the time, and that was freedom for their kids, freedom for freedom to have lunch where they wanted to have lunch. I mean, John Lewis's life brought so much to all of the rest of our lives, because now I get to enjoy those freedoms. You enjoy those freedoms. Our children can enjoy those freedoms together, you know, and that's what this country is all about. That's what it's always been all about. And I want my listeners to come on back and listen to our wonderful district attorney, Joe Gonzales, because you're going to learn a lot about him. This guy is more than just a suit and a great looking uniform. So come on back and listen to On the Record with Tiffany.